All right. Well, as you probably remember, yesterday we spoke about eliminative and collective engagers. It was maybe a little bit complicated, some of the concepts introduced. One concept is the relationship between phenomena. As I said, it's also mentioned in science and philosophy, so I explained it, saying that if two phenomena are one substantial entity, which means both are impermanent, um, then they can also be of the same substantial entity with regard to object, time, and nature. Now, in science and philosophy, the Tibetan authors say basically they are the same with regard to object, time, and nature, which also works. It's a nice and short way of saying the same thing. Because what it really means is, so you have two things. For instance, the impermanence of vase and the vase itself. They have such a close relationship that the minds for which each serve as the appearing object are equivalent. So in other words, whatever is a mind to which the vase appears, whatever is a direct perceiver in particular, because saying appearing object when both are impermanent, when both objects have to be impermanent, then the appearing object can only be the appearing object of a direct perception, right? If we say they're of one nature, if they're of one substantial entity, implied by that is that both phenomena that are of one substantial entity are impermanent. And if the minds for which they each serve as the appearing object are equivalent, we're talking about direct perception, because an impermanent phenomenon can only be the appearing object of a non-conceptual mind or of a, direct perception. So let's take vase and the impermanence of vase. Whichever mind, so whatever is the mind to which the vase appears, is also the mind to which the impermanence of the vase appears. And whatever is the mind, or no, direct perception, I need to say. So whatever is the direct perception to which the vase appears is also the direct perception to which the impermanence of the vase appears, and vice versa. So whatever is the direct perception to which the impermanence of the vase appears is also the direct perception to which the vase appears. So in that way, when one appears to a direct perceiver, the other does too. That's saying they're the same with regard to object. With regard to time, that's pretty easy. Whatever is the time, so the time of their respective arising, the time of the arising of the vase and of the impermanence of the vase is the same. Of course, they arise, so they come into existence simultaneously. And then lastly, the phenomena that are of one nature with each of them. So the phenomena that are of one nature with vase are also of one nature with the impermanence of vase, and the other way around. Okay. Having said that, so in that context, or in the context of eliminative and cognitive and collective engagers, the text very much emphasize this particular relationship. So taking the example of vase and the impermanence of vase, and in the case, therefore, of a collective engager, when the vase appears, its impermanence has to appear. And when the impermanence, so the impermanence of the vase or other attributes that have a similar relation or the same relationships, such as the vase being a product. This is not true for an eliminative engager. Why? Because when the vase appears to a conceptual consciousness, its impermanence doesn't appear. The same is true for sound. When you express vase, you don't express the impermanence of vase. Okay, so that was, in summary, really, that's what we talked about yesterday. We discussed the definitions a little bit. Panchen Tsongkhapa gave some definitions that he doesn't, or that he doesn't agree with. Of course, others do agree with it, which is why it was difficult to find a reason why he doesn't agree with it. Engaging, so saying that An eliminative engager is a mind that engages with its object without differentiating, engaging with its object by differentiating between its attributes. That would be an eliminative engager, in that the mind differentiates between the vase, the impermanence of the vase being a product, and so forth, in that not all of them appear to the mind. While a collective engager being defined as a mind which engages with its object without differentiating between its attributes. And in this case, well, the example would be an eye consciousness apprehending vase and all the attributes that have the relationship described earlier, and even more attributes such as its shape, its color, shape, all of those appear to the eye consciousness without the mind differentiating. Of course, Benjamin Sundaba says, well, if that were the definition in particular of a eliminative engager, then the Buddha's mind, it would follow, would absurdly have to be a eliminative engager, because it also differentiates between the attributes of every object it takes to mind. Okay. And then the second definition that Benjamin Sundaba doesn't agree with, and that's kind of, it sounds like that's what eliminative engager and so forth are all about. So saying that an eliminative engager, the definition of an eliminative engager is a mind that engages with its object through the elimination of what is not it, or what it is not. So it seems really that's what it's doing. It's like it's eliminating anything that is not a vase. However, Benjamin Sundaba argues, well, that would not be correct, because you have a yogic direct perceiver that, for instance, realizes the impermanence of the vase. So it engages with its object, the vase, through the elimination of what it is not, which is permanent. The yogic direct perceiver that realizes the impermanence of the vase, while affirming, realizing, or affirming, that's maybe a way of translating that Tibetan word, or while understanding, let's say comprehending, that the vase is impermanent, at the same time, on the basis of the vase, it also negates its permanence, which is why it eliminates what the vase is not. Does that make sense? Was that clear or not? Okay, it was clear. Good. So therefore, Benjamin Sundaba would argue, so then let's take the yogic direct perceiver apprehending the impermanence of the vase. Take the subject, the yogic direct perceiver apprehending the impermanence of the vase. It follows it is a eliminative engager, because it engages with its object in the way described by that definition. Okay. Now, our own system, as I mentioned last time, how does it define according to Benjamin Sundaba, according to mind and Tibetan Buddhism? What is the definition of an eliminative engager?
Lower that engages its object by the power of terminology.
What does terminology mean?
Meaning generality.
Very good. And then the second definition, the definition of an collective engager?
Engages it through the power of the thing.
By the power of the thing. Great, very good. So the power of the thing. How do you translate ngurbo? I mean, do you call it thing or functioning thing?
Functional thing.
Functioning thing. Okay. Oh yeah. So by the power of a functioning thing. I think would probably be better, a functioning thing. Okay. So take the subject, take the eye consciousness apprehending vase. It follows it's a collective engager.
Except.
It follows it's therefore a mind that engages its object by way of a thing. Posit that thing.
The vase.
The vase. Okay. Take the subject, an eye consciousness apprehending two moons. It follows that it's a collective engager.
Why?
It's a wrong one.
Because it's a non-conceptual mind.
No
No
probation.
probation.
Haven't we agreed yesterday? Haven't we seen in the text that all non-conceptual consciousnesses are collective engagers? Remember, it says it very clearly in the text. It doesn't just talk about direct perception.
I thought it said direct receiver.
Sorry, I can't hear you.
I'm, okay.
Yeah.
I
Wait.
thought it was direct receiver, but I forgot.
No,
Okay.
no, actually, Benjamin was very clear on that. Oops, sorry, forgot to. Benjamin Daba is very clear on that. He says a direct, it's any non-conceptual mind. So not just a correct mind, because otherwise you could say a direct perceiver. Because a non-conceptual mind that is a correct mind is necessarily a direct perceiver. But the texts specify that conceptual mind refers to an eliminative engager and non-conceptual mind refers to a collective engager. I mean, those two are synonymous. Therefore, take the subject, an eye consciousness apprehending two moons. It follows. It apprehends its object by way of a functioning thing. Positive functioning thing.
The moon.
The moon? It follows the moon itself. It follows that it does not engage its object through the moon because the moon is not its object. It says it engages its object through the function. So, but the moon is not its object.
No probation.
What about a person who just fantasizes? Like they don't even perceive one moon as two moons. They just suddenly out of the blue see two moons in their room. So in the first case, okay, if you answer the moon, but if you just totally hallucinate. So if take that example, it follows it does not engage its object by way of a functioning thing.
Why?
Why?
Because that functioning thing cannot be posited.
Reason how does it happen?
Posited.
Consola?
The appearance of two moons.
Yes, that's it. The appearance of the two moons. Yes, because it does engage its object by way of the appearance. If the appearance weren't there. So it follows the appearance of the moon is not non-existent.
Except
Yeah, that's
Wait.
it. Absolutely.
But I remember you saying, like, when you see a vase in the corner of the room, the vase and the appearance of the vase are one entity.
Yes, but that's true because both the vase and the appearance of the vase both exist.
So what is two moons? Is it so it exists? The appearance of two moons exists.
The appearance of the two moons exists, but the true moons don't exist. So in this case, it's different.
is it correct in the case of apprehending a bus? Is it okay to say that it is apprehended by the power of the bus, or is it always apprehended by the power of the appearance of the bus? Even if the two.
In the case of a correct consciousness, you can say both. Both are correct.
I see.
Both would be correct. Yeah. Yeah. Okay, great. Now that's really all Benjamin Daba says here. Yeah, that's it. There's, of course, still the debate of the vase, only seeing the rim or the spout of the vase when you look at it from the top. You remember that debate? Really difficult, saying you only look at the vase from the top. And Benjamin Daba also says, he says, you don't have to perceive every part of a vase to be able to perceive a vase. So it should be sufficient for us to see a vase from the top. But that would then follow we see a bulbous object with a flat base able to perform the function of holding water. And then also, I think it was Janine who said, well, what about, we don't know whether there's got a hole in the bottom. So how can we perceive it? We have to really know that vase well. you see, the thing is also about the vase. I mean, the definition, the way it's given, yeah, that makes it difficult to answer this. Fortunately, that's not the case with many of the objects that really count, like impermanence. What's this impermanent? What's the truth of suffering? What's the truth of the origin of suffering? So in that case, the vase, yeah, it can be debated, but I can also see how that's a little difficult. Like, how do you know the vase can hold water? How, when you see the upper part, you don't necessarily see a flat base, and still that's what the definition says. So yeah, anyway, it's not like a big deal, and it gives rise to a lot of debates. Okay, let's look at the text now. Let's look at what science and philosophy says. I think it's a really beautiful explanation. I haven't seen anywhere else, and it may be helpful to understand these two minds better. Engagement via affirmation versus engagement via exclusion. Okay.
319.
Okay, you've got the page number. What did you say? 390, 396, or 390? Okay. All right. To understand how the mind engages its object, it is crucial to recognize that there are two different ways in which it can do so. It can engage the object. So to engage the object, this explanation actually follows from the explanation on the different objects of a mind. So we haven't talked about I haven't talked about object of engagement yet, but it's just another way of saying how it apprehends its object. So it apprehends its object, therefore it engages in its object. It is aware of its object, therefore it engages the object. So it can engage the object via exclusion, and it can engage the object via affirmation. Exclusion is probably better than eliminate. Why? Because the word eliminate is already used in a different context, eliminating the afflictions, for instance. Some would say abandon the afflictions, but yeah, um, I prefer to use eliminate, so that's why my personal preference would be exclusion. But of course, it could also be translated differently. Okay, so object via exclusion, it can engage the object via exclusion, and it can engage the object via affirmation. Dup, dum here. Dup here means affirm, actually. Or another way of saying the engaging the object via affirmation would be to say through the capacity of the real object itself, so of the actual vase. Given the great importance of understanding the difference between these two ways, we offer below a brief explanation of the two modes of engagement. First of all, the authors explain conceptual cognitions, saying that conceptual cognitions which engage their objects through exclusion have the following features. So 3 features here. The first is the causal feature, which means they're not produced by an object condition, an objective condition, or an object condition, such as the presence of an external object nearby, but through the inner force of latent potencies or habits of the mind. So in other words, the reason why conceptual consciousness arises after a sense perception or is always there is through the force of habit. So of course you could argue, is there anyone who doesn't have that habit? Is there anyone who doesn't have conceptual consciousness? Which would be really difficult to posit. Okay. But in general, yeah, so through the inner force of latent potencies or tendencies, habits of the mind, therefore an object is apprehended. There's always an object. Every conceptual mind always has content, in the sense always has an object. Then the objective feature, what's the Tibetan word? Objective feature. Oh yeah, the objective feature. So the object, again, not in terms of causal feature like that which gives rise to it, but in terms of the object itself. They do not depend on unique particulars to act as their appearing objects, as in the case of an eye consciousness, for instance, but take on a universal, meaning generality, or something constructed by conceptual cognition as their appearing objects. Constructed by conceptual cognition. Constructed. Doppeltjöpe. Yeah, that's the closest. Yeah, I guess constructed works. Constructed kind of sounds like the conceptual consciousness is the cause of it, and so it takes some time to construct. But here in this case, of course, they happen simultaneous. Okay, and then you have the functional feature. They engage their objects in such a way that their location, time, and nature appear conflated. I said to you yesterday that the translators made a mistake, but not here, not in this case here, location, time, and nature. It's in the next passage where they made a mistake. So here, this is an expression. It literally, or you could literally translate it as saying that a conceptual mind engages its object in a way that it mixes the location, time, and nature. Now, what does that mean? It mixes the... All right. So if you, for instance, look it up in the text, this concept of mixing location, time, and nature is usually explained on the basis of a vase. Oh, well, the first two are explained on the basis of a vase, and the last one in terms of colors. Now, let's take therefore, because usually the example is given of that of the example given is that of a vase. Let's take the example of a conceptual consciousness apprehending vase. It mixes the location of the vase. In other words, there is no awareness that a vase in the east does not exist in the west. That's how the text expresses it. A vase in the east does not exist in the west. So when you think about a vase, unless you specifically want to think about a vase in the east, or a vase in the west, or a vase in a particular place, it doesn't appear to your mind. It's not relevant to your conceptual mind. It's kind of like a vase floating somewhere in space, if you like. I mean, not located somewhere. Whereas when you have a direct perception of the vase, if you have a like an eye consciousness apprehending a vase, it's very clear the vase is situated somewhere, and you can't that place is still appearing to the mind. Is that clear? So in that sense, therefore, the conceptual mind is unclear as to the location unless it focuses on it, but it doesn't automatically perceive the location. So it mixes the location, or is conflated when it comes to the location, because as an example, a vase in the east, it's not aware that the vase that happens to be in the east does not exist in the west. It doesn't appear to that mind. Okay. And then the meaning of being mixed in terms of time is, well, the vase of the morning time does not exist in the afternoon. In the case of the eye consciousness, sorry, the mixture of time is like not understanding, so not being aware, or there's no appearance of or no sense that the vase in the morning does not exist in the afternoon time. So for the eye consciousness, for instance, it comes with a certain time. There's a certain state of the vase, which happens to be the morning vase. It comes with a whole background. It's these atoms of the vase that existed in that state in the morning. They appear to your eye consciousness. That doesn't appear to the conceptual mind. So it's mixed with regard to the time. And the last one is the mixture in terms of the nature, well, understanding that a multicolored vase, this is what's given here. So the nature of being multicolored is not the nature of being yellow-white, to translate the Tibetan. So not being aware that the nature of being multicolored is not the nature of yellow-white. In other words, when you have a particular vase in front of you, it can have only one particular color, or I mean, it could be multicolored, but it could not be at the same time only blue and multicolored. While to your mind, any kind of color can appear when you think about a vase, if you don't specify. So there is no distinction. It's not like it appears together with a particular nature or a particular time or a particular place. It doesn't have to in order to be able to take to mind the vase. And that's what it means, that the conceptual mind engages the vase in such a way that the location of the vase, the time and nature of the vase, they appear mixed. They seem mixed, not appear as in like that's really what appears to the mind, but they seem mixed. There's no distinct appearance of a particular location, time, and nature unless the mind wants to think about the time, the location, and the nature. Is that clear?
The nature part, Geshima, if you could repeat what
The
that.
nature part. Well, in the text, usually when it explains that the nature of something is not mixed. So if an object is blue, then it cannot be white, for instance. So the nature cannot be mixed. If you perceive a particular vase, either it's got, I don't know, it's blue, completely blue, or it's completely red. It can't be both. But to a conceptual mind, it may even not appear with a specific color, or it may appear one moment with this color, the next moment with another color. It kind of, conflates the nature. So the nature here means anything that is an attribute of it, which is of one nature with it. Okay. Venerable
Yeah.
Benjamin, is that clear?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes, the question. Yeah.
Yeah, this is a kind of a new concept for us. Again, it's part of the study of the first chapter of the Pramanavartika. And we'll get to it again once we talk about collective engagers, how that is not the case for collective engagers. All right.
Geshima,
Yes, please.
just very quickly, would you say that in this case of just this conceptual image, that your mind's, it's like, it's not really focused, it's like fuzzy,
Mhm.
taking a particular appearance?
Well, fuzzy, I wouldn't say it's not focused. It can be very, very focused, but it's still, I think the usage of the word fuzzy is really gets, I mean, it's a really good word to explain that, because it although it can be very focused, it still misses the clarity in comparison, the same clarity that you have when you directly perceive something, right? If you have the object in front of you, it's like all the details appear to your mind. All the details appear together, of course, with a particular time, with a particular location, and with a particular nature. So unless you have a wrong consciousness, you won't be able to ignore the color, for instance, or unless you're, well, if you're colorblind, you have a wrong consciousness. But so if you have no impairment, you have a correct mind, then all the colors appear to your mind. Which is why I find it very interesting, and then maybe I've said it in this class or maybe in the other one, that for instance in movies, when you remember something, when the person, like, I don't know, whoever the main character kind of remembers what they did yesterday, oftentimes it's either black and white or it's fuzzy at the edges. Have you noticed that in movies? Like, just remembering what they'd done yesterday, that implies memory, that implies an an engagement by exclusion or an eliminative engager, where it misses all this clarity, all that, all the details they're missing. So it's fuzzy, or at least black and white. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Any further? Yeah.
When a conceptual mind engages in an object, clarity of that engagement, because it's singular by exclusion, than when it just appears to a direct perceiver.
Say that again, please. Can you repeat that? So in the case of an eliminative engager.
Yeah, you're focusing only on one thing.
Yes, on one thing. That's right.
Exclusion of everything else.
Yes.
Is clarity more if it's focusing on one thing, the engaged object, compared to a direct perceiver to which everything appears, and
Okay. Well, as it's later said, as the authors of science and philosophy, they quote, for instance, Chandrakirti's Clear Words, which is a word commentary on Arya Nagarjuna's fundamental wisdom. In the Clear Words, Acharya Chandrakirti says the sense consciousnesses are stupid. They're dumb. Yes, I underlined it. Where is it? I underlined it. They're stupid, he says. Wait, where is it? Yeah, I can't find it right now. We'll come. We'll get to that. Anyway, so he says they're dumb in the sense that sharpness, the sharpness of appearance, that is not there. But they can focus, they can zoom in, they can understand things about the vast that an eye consciousness couldn't. That's the difference. So it's really a lot more about appearance. I mean, appearance anyway, the impermanence of the vast, for instance, is not perceived by that mind. So the emphasis is on appearance. Why did we not talk about the color of the vase? Why did we not talk about the shape of the vase when we talked about being the same in terms of object, time, and nature? Why? Because here we're saying, because the color of the vase is perceived and the shape of the vase is perceived, but the impermanence isn't with the subtle particles. So it's really mainly about appearance. It appears so crisp. It appears so clearly to the mind. However, so that's the benefit, that's the advantage of that particular mind. However, it can never understand the same as the conceptual mind can, which is not as clear. You can't have all these details appearing to the mind, but you can zoom in and get a better understanding. Of course, why are we learning all this? Because we want to have both qualities within one mind. That clear appearance of the object itself, and at the same time, the ability to investigate, to really understand it. And that is the yogic direct perceiver. That's the yogic direct perceiver. Okay. Anyway, so returning to the text, how does engaging via exclusion take place? Say a pot appears to a conceptual cognition apprehending a pot or a vase, whatever. Not all of the aspects, such as being produced, being impermanent, and so on, that are identified with the pot. It doesn't say that are identified with the pot. It literally says that are the same or are one with the pot in terms of location, time, and nature. So not literally one with the pot, but of one nature with the pot. So in Tibetan, it says one with, but it doesn't literally mean identical with the pot, but rather they are the same as the pot in terms of location, time, and nature. And that's exactly what we talked about yesterday, being of one substantial nature, of arising, abiding, and disintegration with regard to or in terms of location, time, and nature. So a shorter way of using that expression, usually it's not shortened. You do say the whole term in Tibetan, but that's not necessary here. It's just as correct to say that all the aspects, such as being produced, being impermanent, and so on, which are the same as the vase in terms of location, time, and nature, all of these appear to that conceptual cognition as they do to a non-conceptual cognition. So not all of them appear, whereas they do to a non-conceptual cognition, whereas they do to, so therefore to an conceptual consciousness apprehending vase, being produced, being impermanent, and all the other attributes of the vase that are the same as the vase in terms of location, time, and nature, they don't appear. While they do appear, or whereas they do appear to a non-conceptual cognition of the vase. And so here, again, location should be object. Oh, I said location. I meant object. Sorry. That's where the mistake came in. It's confusing. I get it. It's confusing because in the first case, location, time, and nature are correct. In Tibetan, it's yul, tu, rangshin. Yul, tu, rangshin. So yul can mean object, it can mean location. In the first case, when we talked about location, time, and nature appear conflated, that's correct. That is absolutely correct, because from the explanation, it becomes clear we're talking about the vase in the east, the vase in the west. It can only refer to location. In the second case, it shouldn't be location. It shouldn't be location. Why? Because here we're talking about appearing object. The minds for which one of them is the appearing object and the minds for which the other is the appearing object, they are equivalent. So in other words, if one appears to a direct perceiver, the other appears to a direct perceiver. And that means object. It's got nothing to do with location. But as I said to you before, I was curious how the translators, and I'm saying translators because I don't know who made that mistake. But I was curious. I was thinking, oh, let's check the dictionary. Maybe there's a mistake in the dictionary, and there is. I checked one of the dictionaries that's used the most, the one that you find on an Apple, and in there it mistranslates location. Instead of saying object, it says location. It translates the first expression correctly, but then the second also using also location. But then I checked the Tibetan dictionary, only Tibetan, and there it's correct. It uses actually Benjin Sonotapa's quote. Benjin Sonotapa, what I read to you yesterday, he read exactly, I think it's Möllam, the Möllam Chimbo, so the person is called Möllam, I don't know, Denzin Möllam, I think. Anyway, this monk, Denzin Möllam, who did an amazing job with his dictionary, Tibetan, in there he quotes Benjin Sontapa, and he doesn't always quote Benjin Sontapa. He quotes whoever is clearest when it comes to the definition of something. But in the case of this particular term here, so the same in terms of, or actually the whole term he cites, being of one substantial entity and so forth, he very clearly says object of appearance. So in the Tibetan dictionary, it's correct. In the English dictionary, it needs to be changed. And it's such a specific term. I only found it in one English dictionary, not in the other ones that are available these days. Okay, so on that are Okay. Anyway, sorry. I hope I didn't confuse you too much with this extra explanation. But yes, first when it comes to the functional feature, it should really say location, time, and nature. While in this next paragraph, pot in terms of, it should not be location, it should be object. Instead, it goes on to say, only one of these features appears. So only one of these features, basically the vase itself. Even a single object, such as a vase or such as a pot, has innumerable features that are its own attributes, such as the pot being impermanent or being produced or rising from effort, and so on. When a conceptual cognition apprehending a pot engages its object, the pot, it engages it through excluding that which is not a pot. So in the definition before, that which it is not, you could say excluding that which is not itself. That would work. You remember with Benjin Sontapa's definition that I gave you, like a mind that engaged, so the wrong definition, so the mistaken definition of an eliminative engager was posited as a mind that engages its object by way of eliminating that which it is not, or by eliminating what is not it. But if you were to say by eliminating which is not itself, then it would be okay. Which was not itself, which is not the object itself, then it would work. So here, even a single object such as a pot, where is it? Even a single object such as a pot has innumerable features. When a conceptual cognition apprehending a pot engages its object, the pot it engages is it through excluding that which is not a pot. So when it perceives a single object, although you could argue, even, I mean, even a direct perceiver does that. And a direct perceiver knows that there's no common locus between a pot and a non-pot. I don't know whether you've come across this, but we spoke about it a little bit. When you have a direct perceiver, then there's certain things that appear to that mind and that are not known by that mind, that the mind is not aware of, such as the impermanence of its object. And there are certain objects that are known by that mind but don't appear to it. Do you remember that? Do you remember, for instance, when you touch a vase, for example, so your body consciousness explicitly, through the appearance of the tactile aspect of the vase, it knows the vase. It therefore explicitly knows the tactile aspect of the vase, not the vase, but the tactile aspect of the vase, while it implicitly knows the shape of the vase by touching it, by touching its shape, its features. So in that case, therefore, you have something that is implicitly known. Another example would be, for instance, an eye consciousness apprehending vase. Explicitly, it knows vase. Implicitly, it knows that there's nothing which is both a vase and a non-vase. Does that make sense? There's nothing which is both a vase and a non-vase. So similarly, in a way, you could then say it includes that which is not a vase. But yeah, here it means something different, as in like nothing else appears to it. And so at the exclusion of anything else appearing to that mind, other than pot, which is the exclusion of not pot. So in that case, it makes sense here. So it engages through excluding that which is not a pot that we might label non-pot. In this case, it does not engage the pot as impermanent or the pot as produced and so on, through having excluded the pot as permanent or the pot as unproduced and so on. All right. Such cognitions are therefore known as engaging via exclusion or engaging through differentiating the attributes.
Krishna?
Yes, please.
Sorry. I got a bit confused here.
Mhm.
The exclusion is in the sense that it's excluding the non-pot, or is it excluding, for example, a mental consciousness apprehending pot will apprehend only a single attribute and it excludes the other attributes of the pot that would appear to a direct perceiver?
Okay, that's a good question. Okay, so what is this? I'll repeat to make sure I don't misunderstand. So your question is, a conceptual mind apprehending pot, does it only exclude pot, or does it also exclude the other attributes of the pot?
Does it only exclude not pot?
Not pot, yes. Or does it
Also-
also exclude other attributes of the pot?
Yeah.
All right. What does everyone else think? So when you think pot, first of all, yes, it excludes non-pot. But does it also exclude the impermanence of pot, the being a product of pot? Does it exclude all that as well?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, but in
Yes.
the definition, when they talk about it as a non-inclusive, right, or as an exclusive engager, do they
Yes.
talk about excluding the opposite or excluding the attributes which it's not paying attention to?
I think everything.
Okay.
Yeah.
Fine.
It doesn't really specify. It just calls it that, and then sometimes explanations are given in the text, sometimes of the nature given here of non-pot, but then it's also explained here that it does not engage the pot as impermanent, though the pot as produced. So it excludes the pot. So through having excluded the pot as permanent. So in a way, here it doesn't exclude the pot being. Wait a minute. Wait a minute. No, actually, the way it's put here. But that's it's a little bit tricky. Because exclude, what does exclude mean? Does it mean to exclude non-pot means to know pot? So to include through valid cognition. In other words, to know the opposite. Or does exclude mean exclude the appearance? Right? That's the question here. Differentiate its attributes seems to be saying exclude also refers to the appearance, because the
Right.
attributes are not the pot. So using the description of differentiating its attributes seems to be saying also excluding the impermanence and so forth. So in other words, preventing it from appearing to that mind because the focus is on pot itself. But then the way the authors put this here, in this case, it does not engage the pot as impermanent or the pot as produced and so on through having excluded the pot as permanent. So here saying it does not exclude the pot being permanent, which seems to be saying it doesn't exclude it through valid cognition. In other words, it doesn't exclude it by way of understanding it's impermanent.
Right.
Right?
So it doesn't.
So you can use it both ways. I think you can use it both ways. You can use it both ways. And the author seems to have done this here by using, when he says it does not engage the pot as through having excluded the pot as permanent. Here the authors are talking about realizing the pot is not permanent. That's not what the mind does. But there's an extra difficulty that is in the text. In the text, there is a debate. There's a debate that someone says a conceptual consciousness apprehending vase is a collective engager. Okay, someone claims a conceptual consciousness apprehending vase is a collective engager. And what is the response to that? For instance, what does Benjamin Darpa say, and other masters as well? I mean, it depends on the text. They say, well, if the conceptual mind apprehending vase, if that mind were, if it were a collective engager, then it would follow that the impermanence of the vase and the vase being a product, all of that would have to appear to that mind. But not just would it have to appear, the mind would have to know it. The mind would have to know it. So that is the consequence. That's the absurd consequence. And you find this all over the commentaries. So the question that arises is, why, if it appears to a conceptual mind, if the impermanence of the vase were to appear to a conceptual mind, in the same way as it appears to a direct perceiver, why would the conceptual mind have to know it? If the impermanence of the vase doesn't have to be known by an eye consciousness. That's always the debate. This is something you need to answer in the debate. And oftentimes the answer that is given is, well, if it is a collective engager and a conceptual mind together, then yes, the impermanence of the vase has to appear, and being a product, all that has to appear. But whatever appears to such a mind that is not the meaning generality, so let's say it knows, we were talking about a conceptual mind knowing vase, so a conceptual consciousness realizing vase. Whatever appears to it that is not its meaning generality is known by that mind. So it would therefore follow a mind that knows, that realizes vase. If that were a collective engager, anything that appears to it other than its meaning generality, and obviously the impermanence of the vase is not the meaning generality, has to be known by that mind. Is that difficult to understand?
No, it's clear.
It's clear? Okay. So this is like, and that's why it says a conceptual mind is an exclusive or an eliminative engager because you require other valid cognitions. You require other valid cognitions. That's what Pramanavartika says. It is an exclusive engager. Why? Because other valid cognitions are required to fully understand the pot. Okay. Okay. Anyway, returning to this here. Yes, I would therefore say it excludes not only non-pot by only understanding pot, by only realizing pot is a pot, and therefore realizing pot is not a non-pot. And it also excludes the appearance of impermanence and so forth. Such cognitions are therefore known as engaging via exclusion or engaging through differentiating the attributes. This topic is explained clearly by the Buddhist master logician Dharmakirti. Here's a somewhat lengthy excerpt. I'm not going to read this. because it's a really difficult quote. I'm not sure it's correctly translated. I didn't have the time to sit down and go through it. And anyway, I don't think it is that, it gives you that much more information. Therefore, I'm going to skip this quote. So I'll continue to the next page. This same text also says, and this quote is okay, this quote is straightforward. On what grounds is it known that an exclusion is made known through language and inferential evidence, and that a real thing is not made known directly by them? This is known because additional valid cognitions and statements are employed. Oh, here, that's the quote that I just talked about. That's what's given in the Pramanavartika. On what grounds is it known that an exclusion is made through language? And so basically it's saying inferential evidence, or usually the way it's formulated is a conceptual mind and language, or a conceptual mind and a word. How do we know it is an exclusive engager? Well, this is known because additional valid cognitions and statements are employed or need to be employed. Now, without talking about language here and words and so forth, we just focus on the conceptual mind. Why is a conceptual mind an eliminative engager? Because you require additional valid cognitions. If it were a collective engager, then the impairments of the part and everything else that is has this particular relationship with it would have to appear to that mind. It would also be known by that mind, and therefore you wouldn't need any further valid cognitions. Now consider a non-conceptual consciousness, which is a collective engager, such as a direct sense perception. For example, when an eye consciousness apprehending a pot sees a pot, it necessarily sees simultaneously all the factors that are identified. See, the word see in Tibetan, ponga. So see, you can in certain, of course, in certain contexts, it can mean to realize. Think of a context when the word see means to realize. You'll know a particular context.
Path of seeing.
Path of seeing, very good. So in the case of the path of seeing, yes, see means to realize, but here see means to appear. When you talk about an eye consciousness, something seen, it usually refers to appearance. So it necessarily sees simultaneously, or what appears to it are simultaneously, all the factors that are identified with the pot. In other words, all the factors that are the same as the pot in terms of object, time, and nature. Previously, I kept saying location, but please cross out location. It's object here. So all the factors that are the same as the pot in terms of object, time, and nature, such as its impermanence and its having been produced. Although it sees such attributes, that cognition contacts the object, the pot, which is its objective condition, without depending on either the label pot or the thought that's a pot. All right, so it sees the pot, it doesn't need anything, it doesn't need to know the label, and it doesn't need to have the thought that's a pot. That's not necessary. You can still know pot. The appearance of the pot via the objective condition, so the pot itself, presenting itself to cognition, comes about as if it were transferred into that sense consciousness. It's not really like they even use this language that the pot casts an image onto the eye consciousness. That seems to be suggesting an agency that the pot, of course, doesn't have, right? It's kind of like, look at me. It's not doing that, of course. But then again, when we talk about light bouncing off, there is some kind of agency. I mean, taking modern physics, for instance, light bouncing off, there's some some activity, there's something happening from the side of the object. So in that way, yes, there's definitely some activity, some function coming from the object, but here the authors say as if it were transferred into that sense consciousness. And of course, that doesn't happen. Therefore, minds that engage affirmatively or collectively without conflating, oh, here it is, location, time, and nature. Here the word location is correct. So without mixing location, time, and nature. No, because it's very clear. It appears in a certain location at a certain time and with particular attributes that are of the same nature, which therefore necessarily take the unique particular object itself as an object. So the mind, because it engages affirmatively, everything appears to it, the background, everything else appears to it. Whether the mind is aware of it or not is a different matter. But in terms of appearance, yes, everything appears to it without mixing location, time, and nature. So the mind necessarily takes the unique particular object itself as an object through its appearing just as it is, just as it is. So this is very much Satantrika. Phenomena, external phenomena exist truly in that the way they appear to us, they actually exist. Actually, I did mention modern physics. Honestly, the Satantrikas wouldn't agree with them. They wouldn't agree with them. No, it's not like the Satantrika and the Vaibhashika, but in particular, the Vaibhashika doesn't discuss that so much. It's more the Satantrika that like the explanations imply that they accept phenomena external to the mind exist exactly the way they appear to us. There's blue over there, there's white over here, and so forth. And in that way, therefore they say the mind that perceives an eye, like the mind, an eye consciousness apprehending vase is not mistaken. It's not mistaken. There's a vase out there and it has this color and this shape, and that's exactly how it exists. Which is beautiful because we start off with the Satantrika school. We start off with collected topics, Lorig, Tarik. It's all from the Satantric, well, slowly kind of moving maybe a little bit into mind only when it comes to Tarik, but mainly it's Satantrika. So it introduces us gently in such a way in which we can identify with it. Yeah, blue is blue, red is red. I mean, at the time of the Buddha, you didn't have physics. I don't think you had a physicist who would say, well, there's only color bouncing off and so forth. So people just assume what's out there is really out there. The Satantrika does, of course, introduce the Four Noble Truth. It introduces a particular self that doesn't exist and so on, but it does not tackle the external world. All right. So therefore necessarily exposition of valid cognition says the following, primarily from the perspective of perception. Given that the nature of the object is unitary and perceptible, what other portion of that object that was not already perceived could there be that is cognized by other valid cognitions? Could there be that? Could there be that is cognized by other valid cognitions? I actually forgot to compare the Tibetan. I didn't compare this. I have to look at this again. Sorry for that. I forgot that. Usually I read the quotes as well, but if the rest makes sense, I just skip over the Tibetan. Moreover, so later on I'll explain this again, or if I make some changes, I'll let you know tomorrow. Then it goes on to say, moreover, as already explained in the context of describing the difference between conceptual and non-conceptual consciousness, when cognition engages an object, if it engages by way of qualifying it in terms of a type or universal, qualities or attributes, difference or non-difference, having a location, time, and so on, then it must be posited as engaging via exclusion. So here, if it wants to qualify, this is not about getting mixed up in terms of time and so forth. If the mind is only interested in vase, then it doesn't bother about the time of the vase, the location, and so forth, and it conflates them, it mixes them up. However, if the mind does want to qualify its object in terms of a type or universal, here the word is used as a universal, like a generality. What words do you usually use for like universals? For instance, vase is a universal, golden vase is an example of that. What's the terminology you use?
Generality and instance.
Generality and
Instance.
instance. Okay. Yeah. So here the translators use type for instance and universal for generality. In terms of a type or universal, qualities or attributes, difference or non-difference. Okay. having a location. So qualities, I think attributes here is like parts, which include qualities, but could also mean spatial parts or temporal parts, first moment, second moment, and so forth. Qualities are kind of characteristics. Difference or non-difference. So having a location, time, and so on. If the mind wants to focus on that, then it must be posited as engaging via exclusion. Thus, Chandrakirti's clear words say, oh, here it is. For this is to demonstrate merely that the five sense consciousnesses are dumb. Yeah. A distinction is made between dumb sense consciousnesses and the conceptual consciousnesses that are comparatively smarter. I mean, in terms of the abilities. And comparatively, that's important. Depends on whose conceptual consciousness, of course. Or at what time a conceptual consciousness arises. When we're angry, for instance, it's not very smart. Okay. Furthermore, engaging an object through differentiating its attributes or parts, parts, and engaging via exclusion have much the same meaning. Yeah. For example, when a conceptual consciousness apprehends a tree, it engages its object, a tree, by excluding from its object the tree's attributes. Oh yeah, here, Maya, here's the answer to your questions. Here, they definitely use the word excluding also in that way, such as the tree's impermanence, its production, and other factors, and engages only the tree itself. Yeah. Also, when one brings to mind the conceptual cognition of a pot, for example, it may feel as if a single cognition perceives and apprehends simultaneously the pot's lip, the rim, the spout, base, and belly. But this is due to the speed with which cognitions operate. So this is very, so it doesn't perceive, right? Okay, the lips, okay, but all the debate we had yesterday, just perceiving the vase, so you perceive the base. But here it says you don't perceive simultaneously the base and the belly. Okay, the pot's lip is not part. The spout of the pot is not part of the definition, but base and belly are. So anyway, it seems that the mind apprehends all of those simultaneously, but this is due to the speed with which cognitions operate. Oh, this time I'm noticed I'm okay. It's already 3 o'clock. Great. Okay, we will continue with this tomorrow. Yep. So
Sorry.
please just keep reading.
Just one clarification. When the conceptual consciousness needs other consciousnesses to know other things, we are only talking about conceptual consciousnesses, right? Like the conceptual consciousness will bring up the shape, then it will bring up the color, if that's what it wants to engage in.
Yes, yes, yes. I mean, yes, here in this context, we only talk about conceptual consciousnesses.
Having thoroughly investigated in accord with all that I've heard day and night through the 4 evenings, my mode of reflection on these topics of contemplation, may this discernment stem up all doubts.
Right. Thank you.
Thank you.